in today. We appreciate it. Right now, let's talk more about the future of Fannie and Freddie moving to the top of the congressional agenda. Joining us right now is John Taylor. He is the National Community Reinvestment Coalition CEO. He testified before Congressman Kanjorski's committee Thursday on mortgage insurance. Also, of course, our guest co-host today, Ron Kruszewski, is the chairman and CEO of Stifel Nicolaus. And John, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Glad to be here, Becky.
We have been talking about Fannie and Freddie for some time, and I don't know if you heard our conversation earlier this morning, but David Gregory brought up a question that's been on a lot of our minds. Have we gotten to the point where U.S. home ownership has just gotten too large to be sustained?
Well, you know, I did see that program, and unfortunately, Mr. Gregory's comment is inaccurate. We've actually had a dip in home ownership. When you look at pre this financial crisis, this foreclosure crisis, the amount of home ownership in America versus now, a lot of people have lost their homes. More importantly, we've lost nearly $7 trillion in equity, most of which come from people who weren't in foreclosure but just saw their housing values drop. So it's a significant impact in our economy, since about 25% of the economy is based on real estate.
We spoke with some people earlier this week and last week who were talking about when you get into trouble with home prices like this, that you can see these decreases in home prices and this sort of a depression that lasts around for decades when it comes to home pricing. So, do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, 25% of the economy is based on real estate, and if we continue to watch a decline, we haven't seen hit the floor yet on declining housing values. Some areas have hit the floor, but for the most part, we're continuing to lose the kind of equity that allows people to make home improvements, hire contractors. We have an inventory of almost 11 months of vacant housing, which is disastrous, because you only want to see 2-3 months at the most. And so who's going to be building new homes in the midst of a huge inventory of vacant houses? So it really hurts many segments of the economy. We've got to turn this around. And securitization matters, by the way. We really do need to have, and we can talk about Fannie and Freddie, what form they should take, but we really do need a securitization system that allows lenders and to make these kind of, to make mortgages and to get people into the market and to do refinancing and other kinds of loans that stimulate the real estate economy.
Well, let's talk about Fannie and Freddie first. I mean, this has put the government under a huge amount of strain. Taxpayers are going to be bailing this out for some time to come. What went wrong, and what should Fannie and Freddie look like in the future? Right.
So let's get this right about what went wrong. Fannie and Freddie, up until about 2003, pretty much had minimal involvement in the subprime market, but from 2001 to 2003, they lost $1 trillion worth of market share, mostly to the unregulated segment of the market, those independent mortgage companies, Ameriquest, New Century, Option One, Countrywide, really took the business away from them and the banks. So everybody got jumped into this abyss, and you know, the rest is history. I think one thing is having financial reform, which is going to create more transparency. The bill, the Frank-Dodd bill, is going to be, I probably should say Dodd-Frank bill, is going to be more helpful, because I think it's going to clean up the industry some and make sure that these kind of practices don't happen in the future. As to what should happen to Fannie and Freddie, remember that for 95% of their history, they actually were quite profitable. They did a good job. They assisted people safely and soundly into the home ownership arena, but they were allowed to take on too much debt without having adequate capitalization, and that's what really needs to happen. Right now, our securitization apparatus is dead. The only people securitizing things is FHA, Fannie and Freddie, and Fannie and Freddie at that are really doing the sort of high-end kind of mortgages. They're very high FICO scores. So if it wasn't for FHA, VA, and what Fannie and Freddie are now doing, there wouldn't be any securitization going on. So we have to fix this. But we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
But John, I mean, I think it oversimplifies it. I mean, Fannie and Freddie may have done well for this entire point, but now you've got the taxpayer on the line for more money than we can even get our heads around. How do we make sure that that never happens again, that there is not this implicit guarantee or an actual guarantee?
Well, it's an actual guarantee. John, I mean, the real question is, you got 25 basis points that is underwriting loans today, that the credit risk probably is not being compensated by the 25 basis points. So you have this subsidy to housing. Now, my question is, when my parents bought a house, they put down money. Is home ownership today, when you get a deed of trust and you own 100%? And so there's this whole policy question about renting versus home ownership that I think is going to have to be dealt with. It's just something that we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, all good points. I mean, I think people should not look at renting as an unwanted form of housing. I mean, it's a perfectly good form. Many of us were renters throughout our lives. Home ownership is the #1 ticket into the middle class.